I am so excited. Today I'm joined by Meagan Williamson, Pinterest marketing expert, growth strategist, and someone who's helped thousands of business owners turn visibility into real sustainable growth. Recognized by Pinterest itself, Megan's known for helping entrepreneurs use the platform not just to drive traffic, but to create long term discovery and conversion systems that support their bigger business goals. She's all about organic growth, evergreen strategies, and making content work smarter, not harder. And she's also a mom and entrepreneur who's built a life in a business on her terms, which we'll definitely be getting into that because I know that is also important to me. But if you've been curious about using Pinterest as your marketing, or if you're just craving smarter, simpler ways to grow, this is one to stick around for. So, welcome. I'm so excited to have you here and
Yeah,
dive into
thank you,
everything.
Haley.
Yes. All right. Thank you. Well, let's just get started. I always like to start with story because I think it really pulls people in and helps understand where you came from, how you got started, all the
Sure.
things.
So it's funny because I always call myself like an accidental entrepreneur. But the funny thing is I think other people who have known me a long time or who saw me in previous positions or previous careers, even always recognized it. Like I always moved up in every single position I had. I feel like had way too much responsibility, even as a 16-year-old. I remember I got like a weekend job at a nursery and I went from, like, somebody helping out to running the entire nursery in a
Oh
span
my
of, like,
gosh.
a single ski season, and there was, like, this point where, like, babies kept being dropped off at the daycare center or nursery, and I was like, no, I think this is against the law, like, you can't keep doing this," and they were like, "Oh, got it." I was a very, very responsible teenager, but, yeah, so the writing was sort of like, the writing was on the wall. So my story of how I became an entrepreneur was truly like, I guess it all sort of things lined up. The real story starts that in Toronto, I had a boyfriend who was from Northern Ireland. He had lived in New York, outside of New York, and then Scotland. He lived in Canada for a while. And it came to the point in our relationship after 5 years, he was like, I think we should go live in Northern Ireland. But he had a job in Edinburgh. So as a Canadian, I actually have my Irish passport. I was like, when else am I going to have an opportunity to go live abroad? So off to Scotland, I went with all my life savings, all the money I had saved up working in school psychology. That was my previous career. And I got there and it was kind of like a summer of just fun. We traveled to Italy, I went to festivals, and I was doing some work meetings, but I quickly realized first he realized he wanted to move back to Northern Ireland. I realized that it wasn't going to be as easy as I thought getting a job. Maybe I was just like, who would want to hire me? I have all this experience and I'm young and I'm eager. And I had met some school psychologists. Things were like setting down, sort of like, networking. Next thing I knew, we were packing our bags and moving to Belfast, Northern Ireland, which I was like, okay, great. Once I got there, I realized really quickly that although I was licensed, that nobody was going to hire me. I couldn't even get an interview, Haley. I couldn't get a job that I had had 5, 6 years earlier. Like, I interviewed for jobs that I had had before, and it was really frustrating. I really had that, like, experience where I just started to be like, "Wait a sec, what's happening?" And I always read blogs, and I fell into this I don't know, I just thought, "I'm gonna start a blog about my life living here." I started blogging about decorating my home on a budget, growing vegetables, my long Irish country walks. It's just like daily ramblings. It was that age of when we read blogs that were just like what people were up to. So we could kind of see what their life was like. Next thing I knew, I actually got a job. We didn't call it a virtual assistant. She just called me like her like online help. And I was helping a woman based out of the US with her very successful blog and on business. She was an interior designer and she paid me to be a virtual assistant. And so that was the first time I made money. She would pay me via PayPal. And it allowed me to keep fueling the things I was doing. And I went viral on Pinterest. My blog gained momentum really quickly. But of course, like many young loves, next thing I knew, I was moving back to Canada. I wasn't very happy. So I decided to move back to Canada. And I kept up my work, like my blog part time. And people started asking me if I could help them with Pinterest. And it was sort of this like fun side project. I would help bloggers and small business owners. and brands even were like, "Hey, could you consult for us?" So I was 7 or 8 months pregnant with my son, my first child. I was ginormous. So I'm short, I'm 5'3", and I'm petite. And my husband is very tall. He comes from a family of big babies. So when I was like 7 months, I was measuring like I was 8.5 months pregnant.
Oh my gosh, I love it.
Blissfully ignorant. I had no idea what told me the baby would come late. I was literally working full time, having a blast, meeting up with friends, nesting, and also meeting with clients on the side. And heading into my maternity leave, two of my clients said, we love the strategy you created for us. Do you think that when you're off, like now I look back and I'm like laughing. They were like, when you're off on maternity leave, do you think you would like to manage our Pinterest accounts? And I was like, "Sure, I would love that." And I think I even made a very distasteful joke. I think I said, "I'll be so bored." And I
I
look
really
like
don't know before we have kids.
no, I just thought I would be like, that baby would be sitting in a little baby seat. I would be doing cute coffee walks. I would be like, meeting up with friends. The funny thing is, though, the same thing that I make jokes about really is what propelled me forward. I was gifted with a beautiful, highly sensitive, difficult baby. He cried basically all day long. He didn't sleep for more than a half hour for the first 2 years of his life, Haley. 45 minutes was the longest stretch we got. I hired people. I bought every book. And at 4 months, I was just like beside myself, right? Like he was 4 months old. I hadn't slept for more than half an hour in like no restful sleep. And at the same time, and it feels like so like interesting now, people started saying, "Hey, we know you don't have a website talking about this, but could you do some consulting for us?" And my husband, who's lovely and supportive and would basically like, move mountains for me, was like, "What about if we just make you a really simple website that's like Meagan Williamson offering Pinterest management and consultancy?" And I was like, "Sure." Like, what would happen? So he's a self-trained or was a self-trained web designer. And like a week later, I had a very simple 3-page website. And I have to check my notes. It was either 3 weeks later or 4 weeks later. A CEO of one of the largest bridal companies in the world was like, "Hi, Meagan. I found you on Google. Could you jump on a call with me to talk about Pinterest?" And I went, literally the rest was history. Yeah,
Oh,
that
so
contract alone was half of what I would make in an entire year. So that contract that I ended up closing with him, it was just like, wow, this is incredible. And then it just facilitated that it didn't matter that my son didn't sleep. I could sleep in with him. I could be there for him. I could feed him when he needed to. And my husband could help support me in that. And so that's my story of how I became a business owner.
I love it. I love hearing things like that too. And it just resonates so much because while my kids were okay-ish at sleeping, like the first year of my twins' life was like,
Oh, say no more.
I,
Twins.
I don't even
Like,
it's just like I couldn't imagine like going thankful at the time I did have a full-time job, but I was able to take 6 months off and have even been able to function had I had to
no.
work at 9 to 5. And now being able to grow my business in a way that works to be raising 4 children,
Yes.
it just makes so much sense.
It
And
does. Well, and of course, I don't want any it depends on what kind of parent you are too. Sometimes we joke. I think my husband, he's been the primary caregiver for 8 years, and so he probably identifies with a role that often mothers take on, and, he's like, I just feel like I wanna find myself again." He'd probably kill me to know that I'm saying that on a podcast. And it's interesting because he said, "I love being a dad. I love taking them to play groups and doing all these things." And especially, like, now that our kids are older, we have the funnest life. We go to Mexico, awesome. We can go away whenever we want. We can drive. We always joke, this is one of the biggest luxuries. We can drive to go on vacation or go to our cottage or go camping on the exact opposite of high traffic days. The fact that we can be like, we're going to drive on a Wednesday at 1 o'clock and nobody's on the road. That is pure luxury if you live anywhere that has congestion. the fact that my son will call from school and it's like, oh, okay, who's driving? Not, oh, do we have to ask somebody or we can just rise to like what feels like to this point in our life, every occasion that has come up to be the parents we want to be. And I know that's such a privilege, but really, I couldn't have done this if I had gone back to the school board. Like, I had a I had a wonderful job that, even compared to regular corporate jobs, is very flexible. I have summers off. My days would often end at 4 o'clock, but like I drove an hour to work, I drove an hour back. I can't take vacation when it's a school day. Like you can only take vacation when the school board's on vacation. And now I'm like, hey, let's go away with our family in the beginning of December because that's a great time to go away. That is such an amazing, special thing. And I feel like sometimes people just, we get so brainwashed. We don't even know that those things, like when you're deep in a regular work world, you don't even know that that's possible.
100%. I'd say we're kind of the same over here too. My husband, I have a lawn care business also. And so we're in Wisconsin, so it's winter
Mhm.
here, and he does snow removal, but we haven't had any snow, so it's
No
like
way.
now he's, taking care of the kids and doing all of the things, but
Yeah.
things you like, we can leave on a Wednesday and come home
Yeah.
where I can work from wherever. I also can
Amazing.
we have that flexibility, and sometimes it's hard. It's not all, like, amazing rainbows and butterflies all the time, but it's so worth it, and to have the
Yeah.
flexibility is just key, and also just being able to set up your business and your offers in a way that fits your lifestyle, that fits
100%.
in the way you want to live. So let's get into that because I know
Yeah.
Pinterest is so we want to dive into too and how you're leveraging Pinterest. Can you walk us through how it works? I know a lot of times it's entrepreneurs think of it as a space for DIY ideas and recipes, all the
Which it
things.
is though, it has those things, absolutely. Of
Lots.
course, like, I think when we start talking about a platform strategically, if you just don't get how it works, you wouldn't understand the opportunity or what Pinterest can do for you. So Pinterest has been built from day one in a very different way. The technology has been built as a search engine. So I want everyone to think about that the way that Pinterest has been designed, and not that it added this feature in later, because a lot of platforms are becoming search friendly, or that, like, Instagram made massive announcements about like they're integrating all these aspects of search. And that's mostly because of the way that social media regular people, they're using social media. So our ideal audience. But Pinterest has been like this from day one. So it's a visual search engine and it's all about understanding what is relevant, and it wants to know every single pin gets scanned. They look at the text associated that and they look at what it's linking to. And it wants to know, like, if you think about if we're gonna like make it sound human, but the Pinterest crawler wants to know who should I show this to? What are they looking for? And how can we offer them up with like what would help them? And we call this relevancy. So as a search engine, Pinterest delivers up. You don't need to have a big following. You don't need to have, it doesn't necessarily, you don't have to have clout. Literally, if you have valuable content that aids somebody, helps somebody, solves a problem, it wants to serve up that relevant content to pinners who are actively seeking it. So what we find is that it's funny because Pinterest is sort of this like often neglected social media platform for a lot of business users. I think because they just don't really get it. And like you said, that's where I went to plan a baby shower or plan my wedding. Well, guess what? You went there with the user intent to find ideas, products, and things that inspired you, that informed purchases that you made. And that is the superpower that Pinterest has, and I think a lot of search platforms in general, they have it baked in to map the intent onto solutions. And as people who sell or share valuable information, we share products that solve problems for our audiences, no matter your industry or niche or business model, that we can basically say, hey, I have this great thing that can help somebody. I have a great video on that. I have a podcast episode that talks about that. You can link to every single thing on your Pinterest account. And Pinterest is only growing. It has grown. Somebody asked me recently, do you think it's here to stay? Like, what? Like, it has never fallen back in the numbers. Pinterest has only grown year after year after year. And there's a lot of whispers in the social media and marketing space that people are realizing the power of search, that Instagram's announced search, Threads has search now. And we really are realizing that the way social media has evolved, that we want to make our content discoverable. We want to make our products discoverable. And Pinterest, it's been like that from day one. And I think that people are realizing that too. Some other platforms feel really toxic. It feels really negative. We're more conscious of things that weigh in our mental health. We're conscious of how what's grabbing our attention. And a lot of people are moving towards Pinterest because it's more evergreen in nature. So you post there and people can find you not just for a few days, not just whatever's recently in your feed. That pin gets indexed and shown to people for as long as you have it on the platform. The things that drive traffic to my own business, but also my students, my clients, the people that I share information with, they're getting traffic and sales from things that they shared 3 years ago, things that they created 3 months ago. So it's about creating content that keeps working for you when you're not necessarily even actively working. And if I was to talk about my own business, like I'm a mom, my kids get sick, I want to take time off. We all go through ebbs and flows of energy, or maybe you're just feeling like a little. I actually just had a call this morning with a student, and she said, I'm feeling really burnt out by having to be all these things in my business. And I'm really only going to focus on Pinterest going forward because it's the only thing that's supportive of where I'm at with my mental health right now. And I really wanted to encourage her because she was saying, I feel like I do all this stuff and then no one sees it. Right. And that's really hard. That's really, really hard. I think, we're in this like busy, kind of intense time on social media.
Yeah, I love that you shared that because I think it is it's so important. I was talking about this, but it can be really toxic. And now I feel like all I'm seeing is either the political stuff, which I think you said you're in Canada, so
Mm.
you probably don't have all the chaos that's
Yeah.
happening in our
We
world.
get a we get a version we get a different version of it, but yes, yes.
And then there's the like, oh, you can spot this AI post if it's blah, blah,
Yeah,
blah. Like, it's all you're seeing. And like you said, you can post something once, but then somebody might not see it and now it's gone. Whereas
yeah,
love that with Pinterest. And I have definitely thought about it and it keeps circling back. And I think this is a great conversation we're having because to me, it's like, it almost feels so like new and different to me where
yeah.
social media is like something we've been doing for a while, right? So
I
Pinterest
love that you said that. You just put words to something I've been trying to describe, that where it's
perfect.
like people feel this like intimidation. No, it's so wonderful to hear it through your lens because someone said to me, like, when you start talking about Pinterest technology or keywords, or we would say like SEO, right? Search, that it feels very technical and it feels very intimidating to me. Like I have to know all these things. And it's funny because I guess because I come from a background in science, I really like this idea that I can control aspects of my marketing. And whereas like I find certain other platforms really chaotic, right? You publish and you're like, "Oh, what's going to happen? I think this is wonderful. I spent all this time making it." And I just published something and it's like a good piece of content. It popped off on TikTok. It's doing well on YouTube Shorts. I shared it to Pinterest, but it'll be a longer burn there. Instagram has shown it to 184 people. I have 15,000 followers, and it should also be showing it to new people. Like it's good content, but it's not. No matter what, we sometimes have to look at the data. I think it's like what you're thinking is it's not the default and it feels like new, and new can be a little bit scary. It's been there all along. I think it just feels more technical, but that's what I like to teach is it's really not the way that I've figured out how to really make it feel not so intimidating is you are basically taking the content that you would regularly be creating as a business owner. And hopefully, most business owners are looking at creating content that their audience would really like, that it helps them in some way, that they learn about you or your story, or they learn about who you are values wise. There's all these different angles or perspectives we could take. But what you're doing is you're thinking, if I put this on Pinterest, someone I don't know will want to find it. And how can I make it really easy for them to find it? And oftentimes it's just by adding words that they're searching. So you're mapping, I always say solve what they search. So
Mm.
think about your ideal person, your ideal follower, email subscriber, client, student, whatever word you use, it doesn't really matter. And think about the types of questions that they would love to ask you. And that's what they're looking for on Pinterest. So why wouldn't you make it easy for them to find it? And you might even be doing it by accident already, right? Like on Instagram. I did a little consult with a friend of mine and she didn't realize I said, "Okay, let's talk about something you've created content on." And she's in the automation space and tech. And she's like, "Well, I did this tutorial on Asana or Airtable, one of the two." So we just looked up the word Airtable or Asana, whichever one it was. She had one of the highest ranking reels. And she's like, "Well, I did that by mistake." And I was like, "But look at you already were kind of doing it." Cause she was like, I just don't get it. How do I get search to show me? And we were just playing around. We were voxing each other. And I'm like, look at you have one of the highest ranking videos because you created a really helpful reel that was about your favorite tech and how you use it. And you use the words Asana tutorial for entrepreneurs or how I use Asana as a solopreneur. And Instagram understood that and is showing it to people. And that's just the type of thing that you need to think about. It's sort of just like a little mindset shift.
I love that. And I like how you put solve what they search. And so often when I'm talking about messaging and copy, it's talking in the way that our clients are talking and
Right.
looking at how are they saying the result that they want? What problems are they talking about right now
100%.
versus what we
Yes.
and so it goes the same for that too. So I love that you say that and it's just a different way to think about it. So with that, what is if someone were thinking about getting started and they have all this content, right? They're doing Instagram,
Mhm.
they have blogs and podcasts or YouTube videos. Is Pinterest super time consuming? Is it like
Mhm.
figure out and get started? Where do you start with your clients?
So, well, what I always recommend is and it's actually great because you provided the perfect segue, is get them to look at what they're already creating. So, look at your social media, do a content audit, right? That's the fancy term for it. But I like to say, what are we working with? Do you have product listings? Do you have freebies? Do you have a podcast? Are you already active on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Threads? Are you creating blog content? Basically, you can share anything that has a link. And in fact, I just had a friend say, Meagan, can I share social media content as my entry point? And absolutely you can. So you can share, I always say repurpose with purpose. So you want to take that content and just optimize it for where you're taking it. And that's true for any social media platform or marketing channel. You wouldn't necessarily take what you wrote for a TikTok video and make that the content that you send in an email. You would probably adjust it. Maybe you're more informal, maybe you're more formal, maybe you're moving it to written. So you wouldn't just use the transcription. You might really change it, add a visual, etc. So Pinterest is the same. I would recommend that people look at their content and look at what already is in front of you. What's been successful? Do you then you got to ask yourself, are you creating video? Yes or no? Video is very, very helpful on any platform, right? I think we are all very used to seeing short form video and it allows us to really get to know people, to see what their knowledge is, their depth of expertise. On Pinterest, there is this like thing, and I can explain why, but a lot of people say, well, I don't blog, so Pinterest isn't going to work. And that's not necessarily true. Pinterest is a lot easier if you blog, and it's because Pinterest likes when you share, like, the ideas that you're leaving the platform and leading them somewhere, or you are creating longer format content, and that's when we see a really beautiful ecosystem using Pinterest. So a blog makes that very easy, but it doesn't have to be a blog. It could be to a podcast where they're listening and learning all about you and learning your depth of expertise and the way that you move through the world. It could be to your YouTube channel. So you're active on YouTube and you're creating longer format video. The thing is that I find that some people will come to Pinterest and if they don't have long format content of some variety, they end up struggling with conversions because they're hoping that just the image will convert somebody to buy their thing. But that person's never met you before. So you need to bring them to places where you can build relationships and really nurture them. And that's most often your email list, your blog, a podcast, or a long format video from YouTube. So that's really what I recommend. I recommend like start with social media content, repurpose it for the platform. If you have website links, use those. Loves when you share links to your own website that you've claimed, but you can share anything, even third party. You could share links to if you're on someone else's podcast. I actually create pins for all the podcasts that I'm on and I share it to my account because it's like great PR, right? I was on this amazing podcast with Haley. So I think that when people start realizing how much content they have, Pinterest gets a lot easier.
That is so helpful, especially because I'm always saying to like, especially when I first start with a client or they first come into my program, we don't have to recreate everything from scratch, right?
No.
Because most of the times they've already have tons and tons of content. So what can
Yeah.
we use that's already performing or that's going to build that trust? Because I feel like now more than ever, video or podcast, like just hearing someone's voice creates
100%.
and builds that trust so much faster because of AI and all of the things out there. The more that people can see you or hear you and
Mhm.
you, I think the better your results are gonna be. Do you feel that too?
100%. And actually, I'm just trying to rack my brain and I'm having a mom brain moment where there's just too many things in my brain. There
Right.
was somebody on Threads who mentioned, and I wish I could give them credit. It no, I'm not gonna say it because I might not say the right person and then I
Okay.
feel awful. Somebody was talking about how this day and age where a lot of people are no hate, like I love AI, but a lot of people are using AI or they're actually ripping off other people's ideas, that the way that thought leaders and people who are true experts will continue actually because someone was like, our expert what we thought of experts, are they like gone because we now have a ChatGPT and other AI tools to help us. And somebody was like, this is actually laughable because the reality is that if someone doesn't actually have those skills and that those critical thinking skills and depth of knowledge and ability to sort of like really go deep on a topic, it will become very apparent when you sort of dig deeper because they don't have any long format content. They'll never go on a podcast where they get asked questions. They'll answer they'll just keep everything really short. Same so like a podcast, a long blog post. A blog post I guess is a little bit easier. Or a long video. Like you can't fake it. You can't fake it till you make it, right? My husband was saying that last night. Like he works with me and he does have some of his own projects. But he was saying, like, when he's a real podcast listener, and he said, like, it's so clear when you listen to a podcast when someone has like a deep level of experience, knowledge, and expertise because their host can ask anything and they could talk for 20 minutes about something that they didn't know they were going to get asked because they're just so deep in that world. Whereas people who are using maybe AI, presenting as one thing or pretending to have knowledge about something and don't really, like, the mask is gonna fall.
100%. And I think that's what I love about a lot of the women and coaches I work with is because they're
Mm.
so passionate about what they're doing that they are the true expert. But now
Uh,
we need to get that across to other people, right? Like we have to
yes.
use that in their
No
messaging.
assumptions, right? Like, you can't assume that people know that you know as much as you do.
Yes, exactly. So when it comes to you create your Pinterest account, you're posting on there, is it like social media where you have to post so many times a day or
Yeah,
you
well,
think
it's
that
always
happens a lot or
I always say the more you put into it and the more consistently you can show up, the better your results. So like anything, it's true. You could say it about any marketing channel is the more I think that what I recommend is you start with trying to publish one thing a day. Or public post something, not necessarily publish, that's the wrong word, but post a pin a day. It can be to something that an old blog post, it could be to a product, a lead magnet. But posting once a day. And then once you have some data and feedback and you're like, oh, okay, like this is resonating. Yeah, try to go to 2 a day. Pinterest allows you to schedule out with their free native scheduler 30 days. So you could pop in there. I generally recommend like once every 14 days and schedule out the next 2 weeks. And nobody's going to DM you. You don't have to respond to comments if you don't want to. Like you don't have to babysit it, right? Like who this is like a thing unique to me, but I'm always waiting to the day that I post a video on TikTok and it gets a weird vibe happens and then comments are like strange. I'm always worried because you just never know. I feel like it's a land where things can go like south really quick. And so it's like I'm always worried about the day I wake up and I have like comments that are like strange or being mean. It hasn't happened yet. I don't know how it hasn't happened. It just hasn't. Maybe it's because I'm pretty intentional with my content creation, but you're not going to get that on Pinterest. You really aren't. And I kind of love that. It's very
Yeah.
peaceful and it's forgiving. It's kind of like if you need to walk away, or even I had a friend whose husband was going through brain cancer treatment and she basically walked away from her Pinterest account for 9 months. And she's like, I still got traffic every day from Pinterest. I made sales. And I was like literally like I didn't look at my phone for 9 months. And it's pretty amazing that something can serve you for that long afterwards. And I think actually should like you need to help me because if that's like what happened in my time of complete abandonment of social media and it was the only platform that was thriving during being neglected. So I think that's what I really focus on when I'm thinking about Pinterest and thinking about scheduling is just do what you can. If you're very active and you go through a busy period and you kind of drop off, don't worry. Those pins will keep working for you. I just heard about an artist who was saying she makes sales every single week because of content she posted 5 years ago, 4 years ago, 3 years ago. And so she's like, it's a no-brainer. Why wouldn't I want more sales from things that I created like, my product pins, my blog posts from 5 years ago.
Mm, yes. All right. This is totally selling me as like I need to use Pinterest along with all the million other things I'm doing. But I fully believe it and I like that because I think that's a great transition is even if you have to take time off or step away, where sometimes the other platforms, it hurts you when you're really active and then you're not as active
Yes.
because algorithm where it doesn't sound like Pinterest is doing that.
No.
And I know a lot of our listeners are moms. You're a mom, I'm a mom, our
Yeah.
listeners are. And so we want to create that home life and a business that work together, right? And create the way that we want to show up and we want to live. So,
100%.
how have you created your business in a way, or are there mindset shifts you've had to take along the way that might help our listeners?
I really look at like, I only have so many hours a day. What was that whole quote? Like, "You have the same amount of hours as Beyoncé has." I do not have the same amount of
Right?
hours that Beyoncé has. I wish I did. But what I look at doing is always I've always thought about, like, launching a program called Mini Moves or something because, like, I think I do, like, mini marketing activities every day, and I always focus that, like, 2 to 3 times a week, I'm doing things that are search friendly or SEO friendly. So, for example, that might be a blog post. So, that's going to get me traffic from Google. It's also good. I could share that to my social media to say, like, hey, you should go read this. Then I get those up on Pinterest and then I might turn it into an email newsletter. But I kind of break everything up. For me, it's like small wins. So, I'm looking at doing one or two things a day. And I am 100%, even though this is my full time job, I work in the pockets. Like you and I are going to wrap up our call today. I heard my husband leaving with our daughter. So I know I was supposed to do the school pickup, but literally I already was thinking, oh, I'm going to do these three things while they're still out, like when they're on their way back from school pickup. And that's just like, I kind of was like, oh, yes. Because then once they walk in the door, I shut off. So I have pretty strong boundaries around, like, of course, there are some situations where, they're more urgent, but even when I worked in psychology, we used to say, "We're not saving babies, like, we don't work in the NICU." So, there aren't really many things in marketing that are an emergency, so I create very strong boundaries. I also think that I've been through an interesting stage where when I had my first child, because he was I don't know, he really put us through the ringer, like,
Yeah.
let's
Something.
we
I mean, sleep is
right.
great. Okay.
He's
We have that.
still he's no, we love him. He's just like, he is who he is. And when we had our second, we were always joking, like, we hope she's a loaf of bread, or we always call them potato babies. The ones that just sit and their parents are like drinking coffee and they can do all these different things and they entertain themselves. We do not have those babies. We always joke. We have the anti-potatoes and we're very glad they've given us a lot of gray hair and wrinkles, but they are like, yeah, they're just hilarious. But when I had my second daughter, I planned for when she was first born. I did not plan for the when my son started school and started bringing home germs, and we would all get so sick. The baby was so, so sick, ended up in the ER with her twice because of her getting sick from him. And I went through this period where I really, really had to reconcile my ambition for work with my I wouldn't say ambition as a mother, but like what I knew I wanted, who I wanted to be as a mother. And so I knew I just couldn't have both. And I know there's lots of people who will say, you can, and you can do this and you can do that. It was during a time where a lot of those, it was like at the height of COVID, no grandparents wanted to babysit. We couldn't find anyone to come help us in the house. And I kind of had to have this mindset shift that certain times of your business are for growth, some are for taking care of yourself and your home because that's what's needed. And like my biggest impact in this world will be that I create two amazing human beings. Hopefully more than that, but I don't want to look back and be like, well, I made an extra $10,000, but I have two children who are not nice humans, right? Or I never want them to be like, you're always working. We talk a lot about our privilege. We talk a lot about how we can use our privilege, those types of things. And I think of this old saying that somebody said to me, and it was for, I don't even remember what we were talking about, but they were older and they said, Megan, if it's for you, it won't go by you. And I think it's an old Irish saying. I kind of think about that. Like, when something's meant for you, I actually have a cool story. I can't quite share it yet, but something happened to me when my son was he would have been about 18 months or 15 months old that I went away to a conference for a whole day and I met somebody and I was really taken with them. I really liked what they said. And in that exact moment, I just kind of said like, "Hey, I just want to say thank you. And I just want to say your talk was really beautiful." And what's really interesting is before I had my second daughter, I knew someone that knew that person. And I said to the mutual, could you introduce me to them? Because I would really, really like to work with them, build a network, like somehow do something with them. This person is like my dream mentor. Let's just say that. And the person said to me, no, I can't really do that. Or "Oh, I'll try, but I don't." And they were nice, but they kind of just like, Megan, go away. That person reached out to me, like the person I dreamed of that I introduced myself to, that I asked somebody to say, like, hey, could you put in, like, I'm going to introduce you. They reached out to me and asked in February and asked me if I could have a call with them in March because they really wanted to know about how we could get to know each other and work together. And I said to my husband, I never even told him that story. And I was like, what's weird is I made it happen. Like, and that's what they reinforced to me. I was like, so why did you want to talk to me? And they're like, you just stood out to me. You're very smart. You have very strong values. You look like you patiently answer everybody in your community. And I really like your ideas. And that was like the most beautiful compliment I've ever received in my entire career. But I was chatting with my husband, he was making dinner and the kids were wrestling or we ignored them for 5 minutes. And I was like, isn't that funny that when I asked somebody for a favor, they wouldn't introduce me, but then I got it. I just got it later. And I didn't get it when I was at the height of my like intense, like my family needed me. But now I have a bit of breathing room and I did it on my own. And I don't know if it was for me, it just wasn't going to happen then. And I didn't know that in the moment. And now I see it and I'm like, okay, this is cool.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that story. And it is so resonating. I was just on a call in the mastermind I'm in
Mm,
yesterday, and my coach, I was always saying everything happens for a reason. And we're like, well,
100%.
everything is working out for me. Right.
Yes.
Kind of like what you're talking about is just like, it's not happening to us, it's happening for us. Right.
Yeah.
And have that mindset. It's
Mhm.
powerful. So I appreciate you sharing that. And I feel it's just that perfect timing with everything I'm working through and things that my client.
Cool.
Yeah, it's
Well,
really
I think it can be kind of hard because we have to have that mindset shift. It's easy that even if you love your children and you love being a mom, if you're a business owner and you have certain ideas, like I have to say, there's been times where I'm like, my son is sick and crying and I was holding a baby And I would see someone who's young and maybe not married or doesn't have children, and they're going to a coffee shop and working for 9 hours and slamming out a new funnel. And they're like, and here I'm like, I can't even put this baby down. Oh, and I was like, I'm a little bit jealous, but I'm not because I have these beautiful children that I love and I love my family. But there's a small old Meagan, like pre family, where I'm like, I had all this time and I had all these cool things I could have done. And but it just happens on a different timeline. And I think that's the biggest mindset shift is it's just it happens on a timeline that's a little bit outside of your control, which is hard to let go of. But those things will come to you. Absolutely. It just might not be when you're expecting it.
Yeah, 100%. And I think a lot of times we make our own timelines. So if it doesn't happen when we think it's supposed to, it's
Yeah,
not meant to happen right at that time.
exactly.
We need
Exactly.
to be more flexible with ourselves.
100%. 100%.
Oh, all right. Well, I always like to round out our conversation with having you define how do you define success at this stage in your life?
Oh gosh. There's been so many different stages of success. I think that success looks like this is like kind of laughable that I'm taking care of myself, that we're happy, my family and I are happy and healthy, especially during a time in the world when it feels like a lot of things are on fire. There's a lot of hate. There's a lot of really things I could never have fathomed, 10 years ago. And I think success looks oh, it looks so different than it did. Like people could talk about money, people could talk about, but for me, it's just freedom and getting to choose. I think the choice of freedom is a sign of success to me. I don't really know. That's a really hard question for me. Obviously, I'm like stumbling through what to share with you.
But
Yeah.
I was gonna say, I think those are great, right? Like the freedom to choose and to
Yeah.
like,
It feels like a kind of a funny abstract thing to say, but I think it is just like I prize so much, and actually, I see myself that when I'm forced to do things that are like my old life, and also even in a personal way, like I match a lot of energy now. I'm a recovering people pleaser, and so I started sort of matching energy, and because of that, things that would have fell at my feet that I would have, like, initiated and I would have taken care of before. And now, I don't know, success to me is freedom, that we choose who we wanna spend time with, we choose what we put our energy to, that we have the choice to do something a lot I think too, like you can just talk about from a very big perspective, having the success of, yeah, just simply being happy and healthy is so important to me and to my family. And that's what success looks like to me, is also getting to be the person that I want to be.
amazing. Well, thank you so much, Megan. And thank you for sharing all of your knowledge and wisdom. And I know it has helped me, so I'm sure it has helped. I will put all of your links in the show notes. But if you want to just quickly share how people can find you in case they want to start Pinterest for themselves,
Course.
or maybe they started it and have no idea what to do. So where can people
Yeah, come find me. Thank you, Haley, for having me. I really, really appreciate it. I love always meeting other amazing human beings out there in the online business world. So if people are looking to keep learning with me, the best place is my email list. That is definitely without a doubt where I put all the goodies as well as how people can work with me or what products I have. I also run some really fun Pinterest challenges. We have had 30,000 people go through the challenge over the last few years, and it's always a blast. Those are 3 times a year, but you can go to meaganwilliamson.com. All my socials are listed there. I'm active kind of on everything, to some degree. Instagram, Pinterest, Threads is a great place. I love hanging out with Threads, TikTok. And I've just started dipping my toe back into YouTube. So if you like long format video, you can also look at YouTube. And I'm Meagan Williamson or Meagan A. Williamson across everything.
amazing. I love it. Well, thank you again. It was so wonderful talking with you. So thank you.
Thank you.